My younger sister called me, crying, saying that Grandpa was in the ICU and that I should go quickly to save him. I rushed to the hospital, but upon reaching, Grandpa was not there. I checked my phone and was shocked. My sister had faked Grandpa's illness and was now marrying my wealthy fiancé. I quickly moved to the event, and they were shocked to see me. I just laughed because the man she was marrying was actually— I used to believe that family was everything. That no matter how hard life got, no matter what obstacles stood in the way, the people you loved the most would always be there for you. I was wrong. Betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people you trust the most. Just days before my wedding, I sat in my Chicago apartment, sipping coffee, staring at my wedding invitations spread across the table. Everything was perfect. The venue was booked, the guests were confirmed, and my dream dress was hanging neatly in my closet. In less than a week, I would walk down the aisle to marry Noah Bennett, the man I thought was the love of my life. I had spent years building a life in Chicago. I wasn't just an ordinary woman waiting for a fairy tale marriage. I was a successful real estate developer, managing multi-million-dollar projects, closing deals, and making a name for myself in a city full of competition. And Noah? He was a well-respected investment banker, always dressed in sleek suits, always talking about the next big deal. We were a power couple, or at least that's what I believed. Then my phone rang. The second I saw my younger sister's name, Madison, flash on the screen, I hesitated. Madison and I had always had a complicated relationship. She was 4 years younger than me, always reckless, always craving attention. Growing up, she had a way of making everything about herself, always stepping into my shadow and trying to steal the light. But this time, she sounded different.
Panicked.
Hysterical. "Sophia,"
She sobbed.
"you need to come right away. It's Grandpa.
He's in the ICU.
It's bad. It's really bad." My heart stopped.
Wait, what? Grandpa?
The ICU. I gripped my phone tighter, already standing up. "What happened?" "He collapsed at home. They rushed him to the hospital," she cried. "The doctors won't tell me much, but they said it doesn't look good." I felt my knees weaken.
Grandpa.
My rock. My anchor. The man who raised Madison and me after our parents died. "I'll be there soon," I said without hesitation. I grabbed my suitcase, threw in some clothes, and booked the earliest flight to New York. Noah wasn't home, so I sent him a quick text. "Something happened to Grandpa. Flying to New York. Call you soon." No reply. I didn't think much of it. I figured he was busy finalizing last-minute wedding details. But now, looking back, I wonder if he was already standing at the altar when I sent that message. The flight felt endless. I couldn't sit still. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept picturing Grandpa lying in a hospital bed, barely breathing, doctors rushing around him. I tried calling Madison again, but it went straight to voicemail. The second the plane landed, I rushed to the hospital, running through the automatic doors, praying I wasn't too late. I nearly slammed into the front desk. "I need to see William Carter." He was brought into the ICU. The nurse frowned, flipping through her records. "I'm sorry, but there's no William Carter admitted here." My heart dropped. That can't be right. He was brought in today. My sister told me. The nurse shook her head. "Are you sure you have the right hospital?" I took a step back, confusion clouding my mind. Yes, I'm sure," my sister said. Something was wrong. I pulled out my phone and called Madison. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. The confusion twisted into fear. I grabbed a cab, giving the driver Grandpa's address. I didn't know what to expect. Had they moved him? Was he already discharged? Why wasn't Madison answering? The whole drive, I felt like I was suffocating. My hands were clammy. My head was spinning. Something was wrong. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found when I arrived. The moment I opened the door to Grandpa's house, my breath caught in my throat. There he was, standing in the kitchen.
Smiling. Completely fine.
"Sweetheart." Grandpa beamed, setting his coffee down. "What a surprise. What are you doing here?" I froze. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. He was fine.
Not in the ICU.
Not even sick. I blinked. Grandpa, okay? He chuckled, raising an eyebrow. Of course I'm okay. Why wouldn't I be? My heart pounded. Madison called me. I whispered. She said you were in the ICU. That you collapsed. That it was serious. Grandpa frowned. The ICU? I haven't even had a cold this year. Are you sure you heard her right? I felt like my entire body went cold. It was a lie. The hospital. The ICU. The emergency. All of it. A sick feeling rose in my stomach as I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking. I clicked on Instagram, opening Madison's page. And there it was. A wedding photo. Madison, standing at an altar, wearing my wedding dress, holding Noah's hand, both of them smiling like they hadn't just destroyed my world. I stared at the caption, the words blurring before my eyes. Sorry, sis, but sometimes love can't wait. I couldn't breathe. I had left my home, my wedding, my life in Chicago intact. I had rushed across the country thinking my grandfather was dying, and instead, my sister married my fiancé. My hands trembled. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, trying to keep myself from collapsing. Grandpa's voice was far away, but I could hear the sharp edge in it. Sophia? What's wrong? I swallowed hard. I need a second. I turned away, stepping outside, gasping for air. My phone buzzed in my hands. A text. Daniel Rossi, my mentor. A man who had guided me through my career, who had helped me navigate the real estate world and the power games in business. It's done. You now own 55% of Bennett Capital. Congratulations. I stared at the message, barely processing it. Bennett Capital. Noah's company. The investment firm he had spent years building. The company he had been desperate to save for the past 6 months. He had fought tooth and nail for funding, nearly bankrupting himself trying to hold it together. And now, the majority of it belonged to me. Noah had spent months hiding his company's struggles from me, but I had found out through my own connections. And I had done what any intelligent businesswoman would do. I had outmaneuvered him. I had planned to surprise him after our honeymoon, to show him that I had saved his company out of love.
But now?
Now, it wasn't about saving him. It was about destroying him. I took a slow, deep breath, a cold calm settling over me. I wasn't the kind of woman to cry. I wasn't the kind of woman to beg for explanations.
No.
I played to win. And Madison and Noah? They had no idea what was coming. I don't remember how long I stood outside Grandpa's house, staring at my phone. My mind was a mess, my body felt numb, and the world around me blurred into nothing. The betrayal was too big, too overwhelming, for me to process all at once. My sister. My fiancé. The wedding that was supposed to be mine. It was all happening while I was running through an airport, desperate to save a grandfather who had never even been sick. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Madison had set this up carefully. She had waited for the right moment, created the perfect excuse to get me out of the city. She had stolen my wedding dress, taken my place, and without hesitation, she had walked down the aisle in front of our friends, our family, our colleagues, and married Noah, the man who had whispered to me just last week that he couldn't wait to call me his wife. The memory of his voice, his arms around me, made me sick to my stomach. I wasn't naive. People betray each other every day. I had seen it in business, partners double-crossing each other, backroom deals killing careers overnight. But I had never imagined it would happen to me, from the two people I trusted the most. I wanted answers. I wanted to scream, to demand why, but deep down, I knew there was only one reason. Money. Madison had always been reckless with it, burning through whatever Grandpa left her. Noah? He was drowning, trying to keep Bennett Capital afloat, hiding it from everyone. They needed each other. She had the money he wanted, and he had the charm she always craved. They must have thought I was a fool, that I would break, that I would disappear, humiliated and weak. But I didn't break. I don't break. Instead, I smiled. A slow, bitter smile, because they had no idea what they had just done. I had left Chicago thinking I had everything. I was returning knowing I had more than they ever expected. I booked the next flight back, my hand steady as I checked my phone one last time. My grip tightened as I stared at Daniel's text. I now owned 55% of Bennett Capital. I had control over everything Noah had tried to save. The moment I stepped off the plane in Chicago, I called Olivia Price, my best friend, my closest confidant, and a journalist who always had her ear to the ground. "Are you home?" I asked, my voice calm. There was a pause. "Sophia?" Olivia's voice sharpened with concern. "You're back? I thought you were in New York for your grandfather." "He's fine." I cut in. "He was never in the ICU." A heavy silence. Then Olivia cursed under her breath. "Tell me you're joking." "I wish I was." I sighed, stepping into a cab. "I need you to come over."
Now.
20 minutes later, Olivia walked into my apartment, her arms crossed, her brown eyes narrowed. "Start talking." I told her everything. The fake hospital call, the flight, Grandpa's confusion, and finally, the wedding photos. When I was done, she let out a slow breath. "I should have known something was off," she muttered. "I saw the photos this morning and thought it was some kind of joke. I kept waiting for you to call and tell me they were fake." I scoffed. "I wish." Her expression darkened. "This isn't just betrayal, Sophia. This is humiliation.
Public.
Intentional. They wanted you to see those photos." I already knew that. Madison had posted them knowing I would be scrolling through my phone, devastated, lost. She wanted to make a statement. She had won. But she was wrong. I turned my phone around, showing Olivia Daniels' message. Her eyes widened. "Wait, you own Bennett Capital?" 55% of it, I confirmed. A slow, wicked smile spread across her lips. They really have no idea what they just walked into. I sat back, feeling a new kind of calm settle over me. No, they don't. But they will. That night, I was invited to their wedding celebration dinner at La Bella Vita. Not directly, of course. But Madison's friends were careless on social media, posting videos, tagging the restaurant, making it easy to find. I didn't hesitate. I slipped into a sleek black dress, tied my hair back, and walked straight through the doors of La Bella Vita, ignoring the stares that followed me. The restaurant was packed, laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. And right in the center, Madison and Noah sat together, glowing, surrounded by friends and business associates. I didn't stop. I walked straight to the host and smiled. "Table for one." I felt the shift in the room. The hushed whispers. The way Madison's smile froze, her eyes widening in shock. Noah's face paled, his fingers tightening around his glass. I sat gracefully, picked up the menu, and casually scanned it. Madison shot up from her chair, knocking over her drink. "Sophia." I lifted a hand, stopping her. "Don't let me interrupt. Enjoy your evening." A few guests looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. One of Noah's business partners cleared his throat. "Why don't you join us?" he offered, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. I smiled. "That's very kind, but I have work to do before next week's big announcement." Noah stiffened. His head snapped up. "What announcement?" I took a slow sip of my wine. "Oh, you'll find out soon enough." I knew what was coming next. Madison grabbed my arm, her grip tight, her breath shaky. "We need to talk," she hissed. I let her drag me toward the restroom, watching her carefully. She turned the second we stepped inside, her eyes wild. "What the hell are you doing here?" I raised an eyebrow. "Having dinner." "You can't just—" She stopped, exhaling shakily. "Sophia, I know you're angry, but—" "Angry?" I echoed. I tilted my head, watching her squirm. "Madison, I'm not angry." Her lips parted, her confidence faltering. "You're not." "No," I took a step forward, my voice soft. "I'm calculating." She flinched. "Tell me, Madison," I murmured, leaning in slightly. "How does it feel? Knowing you spent all that effort stealing a man who's about to lose everything." She blinked. "What are you talking about?" I smirked. "Oh, sweetheart." I patted her shoulder, and stepped past her. "You'll see soon enough." As I walked back to my table, Noah was watching me.
Stiff.
Suspicious.
Good.
Let him be suspicious. Let them wonder. Because I wasn't just going to win. I was going to destroy them. When I walked out of La Bella Vita that night, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel heartbreak. All I felt was focus. Madison and Noah had stolen my wedding, my trust, and my dignity. They wanted me to crawl away in humiliation, to disappear while they enjoyed their new life. But they had no idea that I was already setting the pieces in motion, that the real game had only just begun. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I took a cab to a quiet corner of the city, where a man named Ethan Miles was waiting for me at a small cafe. His message had been short and cryptic. "We need to talk. I have information about Noah." I stepped inside, finding him at a back table, a cup of untouched coffee in front of him. He looked up as I approached, his gaze sharp but unreadable. "You must be Sophia Carter," he said. "And you must be Ethan." I slid into the seat across from him, folding my hands. "Start talking." He didn't waste time. He slid a folder across the table, and as I flipped it open, I felt my stomach tighten. Bank records. Wire transfers. Financial statements. "Noah's been stealing from his own company," Ethan said quietly. "But here's the interesting part. The money isn't in his accounts. It's in accounts under your sister's name." I exhaled, scanning the numbers. Millions had been funneled from Bennett Capital into offshore accounts under the name Madison Carter Bennett. Ethan leaned forward. "I've seen this before. He's setting her up. If this ever comes to light, he'll say she was behind it all, that she tricked him into transferring the money. He'll come out looking like a fool, but he won't go to prison. She will." I closed the folder slowly. "Does Madison know?" "No," Ethan said. "She thinks she won. But Noah's never been the kind of man to share his throne." A bitter smile touched my lips. "He's not just a liar or a cheater. He's a criminal." Ethan nodded. "And if you play your cards right, you can take him down completely." I looked at him carefully. "Why are you helping me?" His jaw tightened. "Because Noah did this to my sister. Years ago. He convinced her to take out loans under her name, then left her with the debt when everything collapsed. She lost everything, and he walked away clean." I stared at him for a long moment. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a pen. "Then let's make sure he doesn't walk away this time." The next morning, I called for an emergency board meeting at Bennett Capital. With my new controlling shares, no one could stop me. Noah didn't know it yet, but he was walking into his own execution. By 3 p.m., I was seated at the long conference table inside Bennett Capital's headquarters. Around me, executives and shareholders whispered, wondering why I had called this meeting. Then at exactly 3:05, Noah walked in. His expression hardened when he saw me. "What is this?" I smiled. "Take a seat." He hesitated, glancing around. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the uncertainty in his eyes. He was smart, he knew something was off. But he had no idea how bad it was about to get. When everyone settled, I nodded at the man beside me. Ethan stood, flipping open his laptop and connecting it to the large screen at the front of the room. "For the past year," he began, "millions of dollars have been siphoned from Bennett Capital into private accounts. On the surface, these accounts appear to belong to Madison Carter Bennett." A murmur ran through the room. Noah stiffened. His fingers curled against the table. "That's ridiculous." Ethan continued as if he hadn't spoken. "However, after deeper investigation, we found that every transaction was authorized by Noah Bennett." He clicked to another screen, displaying emails, signatures, transfer approvals, every piece of evidence needed to bury Noah alive. The boardroom fell into stunned silence. Noah's father, Richard Bennett, a founding member of the company, sat in horrified disbelief. Finally, Noah stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is a setup," he snapped. I tilted my head. "You mean like how you and Madison set me up?" His face drained of color. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Tell me, Noah, if you weren't stealing, why did you make sure all the transactions led back to my sister?" His jaw clenched, but he had no answer. Richard Bennett stood. His voice was cold, firm.
Noah.
Is this true? Noah stammered. I was consolidating funds. It was temporary. The other board members murmured, shifting uncomfortably. The tide was turning. I sat back, watching him crumble in real time. Harrington Enterprises is in a crisis, I said smoothly. The only way forward is new leadership. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Effective immediately, I'm proposing that Noah Bennett step down. His father was the first to nod. Then, one by one, the other members raised their hands. It was unanimous. Security moved in, stepping toward him. Noah lunged for me, his face twisted in rage. You think you've won? He hissed. You think this is over? I smiled.
Oh, Noah.
I didn't just win. I finished you. He was dragged out, his voice echoing down the hallway. I turned back to the board. Now, I said, adjusting my blazer. Let's discuss how we're going to fix the mess he left behind. After the meeting, I walked outside into the crisp evening air. I barely had time to breathe before I heard a soft voice behind me. Sophia. I turned. Madison stood there, her arms wrapped around herself. She looked small.
Lost.
She swallowed hard. You knew. You knew all along. I found out yesterday, I admitted. Her voice wavered. He never loved me, did he? I sighed. He loved what you could do for him. That's not the same thing. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't expect you to forgive me, but she looked down. I don't know what to do. I studied her carefully. Then I pulled a business card from my bag and handed it to her. Christine Moore. Fraud lawyer. She's the best in the city, I said. Call her. Fix this. Madison looked at the card, then back at me. And us. I hesitated. Then I shook my head. We're not there yet. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I understand. As I walked away, my phone buzzed with another text. Ethan. Now that the board's handled, let's talk about the gala. I have a feeling Noah's not done making a scene. I smirked. Oh, I was counting on it. The night of the Bennett Capital Gala arrived, and I knew this was the final act. This wasn't just an event. It was the stage where Noah's downfall would be complete. He thought he could still salvage his reputation, still convince people that he was a victim of circumstance. He was wrong. I walked into the venue with my head held high, wearing a sleek black dress that exuded power. Eyes followed me, whispers spreading through the crowd. People knew something had happened, but they weren't sure how much of the story was true. That was about to change. Across the room, I spotted Madison. She looked tense, her fingers clutching a champagne glass as her gaze darted around, searching for Noah. She was finally realizing that the man she had betrayed me for had set her up to take the fall. And then I saw him. Noah entered as if nothing had happened, dressed in his usual tailored suit, shaking hands, forcing smiles. But I could see it, the tension in his jaw, the flicker of desperation in his eyes. He was trying to hold on to power he no longer had. I let him think he still had a chance. Let him claw for hope. Because the higher you think you are, the harder the fall. At exactly 9 p.m., Ethan gave me the signal. The press had arrived. I stepped forward, clinking my glass lightly, drawing the room's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice smooth, carrying through the space. I'd like to make an announcement. The murmurs died down. Even Noah stopped talking, turning to face me. His smile faltered. I met his gaze. Time to end this. As many of you know, Bennett Capital has been undergoing a leadership transition. I began. Tonight, I want to thank those who have stood by us as we move forward into a new era of ethical business practices and transparency. The words hit him like a slap. He knew where this was going. I continued. However, before we celebrate, I feel it's important to shed light on some unfortunate discoveries we made over the past few months. A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Noah's fingers tightened around his drink. Ethan stepped forward, holding up the evidence. Millions of dollars were siphoned from Bennett Capital into offshore accounts, he stated. At first glance, These accounts appear to belong to Madison Carter Bennett. Gasps erupted. Madison's face drained of color. But upon further investigation, Ethan continued, we found that every single transaction was approved and executed by Noah Bennett. A stunned silence filled the room. Then whispers, murmurs, disbelief. Noah stepped forward sharply. This is slander, he snapped. I raised a brow. Oh, then perhaps you can explain these signed documents. Ethan clicked to the next screen, emails, transaction records, signed approvals, all proving Noah's guilt. Noah froze. His father, Richard Bennett, pushed forward, his face twisted with rage.
Noah.
Is this true? Noah stammered, but his silence was answer enough. The police stepped into the room. Noah Bennett, one of the officers said, you're under arrest for fraud and embezzlement. The room erupted into gasps and flashing cameras. They pulled his hands behind his back, cuffing him. He turned toward me, pure hatred in his eyes. This isn't over, he hissed. I smiled. Oh, but it is. They dragged him away. I turned and found Madison standing there, frozen. Her voice shook. I didn't know. I studied her. For the first time, I saw someone lost, broken, used. I pulled a paper from my bag and handed it to her. A job, she whispered, confused. A chance, I corrected. To help victims of fraud. To fix what you can. Her eyes filled with tears. Why would you do this for me? I sighed. Because I'm done letting Noah destroy lives. Including yours. She nodded, clutching the paper like a lifeline. I turned and walked outside. The cool night air felt lighter. Noah was gone. Madison had a choice. And I was finally free. The next morning, I sat at the head of the Bennett Capital boardroom. The CEO nameplate gleamed in front of me. I smiled. Let's get to work. Because this wasn't just about revenge. This was about rebuilding. And I had already won.